Good morning and good April 12th. Anyway, at this time of year when we start to think about the springtime and the new birth of the year and things like that, uh, and the fact that so many uh, formulaic spiritual things deal with the coming up of plants. Yesterday, I showed you a bit of our garden. I just showed you the Constance what Constance has done to the backyard with a lot of ivy and or not ivy but clover and uh, but seeds lay buried and seeds of plants are produced as the plant is flowering and in a sense dies. Okay, and the seeds drop into the earth and get themselves buried. And people observe this. So, primitive people or our ancestors observe this. And, there's winter and snow comes over the top of it, and everything looks all dead. Even the trees, most of them lose their leaves, and you just don't know whether it's ever going to come back again. And then when the sun comes back and the penetrating rays of the warming sun, uh, and the snow melts, and something weird happens to these dead seeds. They start to do their little thing, and the whole cycle starts over again. Uh, what does this have to do with what I'm going to talk about? I don't know. Last night, I had the great pleasure of being the guest on the Hermetic Hour, which is a podcast that is hosted and has been for a number of years by the great American magician and very high degree Freemason, Carol Polk Runyon. And Polk and I have been friends for many, many years since we were both kids. Maybe not that long, but anyway, it was just fun talking to Polk, and uh, we talked about my new book that I have just finished, which is a tarot-related book, and excuse me while I have some coffee here. But the conversation turned to the book, the new edition of a book that I had written many years ago and then have rewritten and published just in the last year. It's my novel, Accidental Christ. Okay, this thing. Because our attention or our conversation turned to the particular ritual of resurrection that literally a ritual of resurrection that I discuss and describe in the novel Accidental Christ. And well, I guess to prepare us for today's little few minutes together, when I was raised in Masonry, that's what happens to you in the third degree, that you're raised, okay, like as in resurrection, you're raised. I won't tell you about the ceremony. You can read it anywhere. It's just that Masons say, well, you're not going to hear it from me. But anyway, a few weeks after the Mason is raised, uh, you memorize the entire ritual ceremony. What happened to you next? And well, this happened to me next. And well, what happened to you next? Well, I did this and I did this, and then the senior deacon told me this, and the worshipful master told me this, and yeah, it's a lot of memory work. Okay, it's a ton of memory work. And if you're in California, if you're going to qualify to be uh, an officer in the future in the lodge, you have to prove up. You have to give back, is what they say. You give back the degree in front of everybody. Okay, and it takes a while to memorize it, and they give you a coach and everything, and you're calling them up on the phone and say, "Can I read? Can I give it back? Can I try?" And finally, and the stage fright is hideous because all of these old farts know this by heart. Okay. When I received the third degree lecture on the night of my raising, the brother that delivered the master's speech delivered it in what they call long form. Okay, it's about a 30-minute nonstop memorization. And the brother was in his at least late 80s. He was a retired admiral, I believe. And he stood up without notes, without anything, and delivered the long form master's lecture. And I looked to the side, the sideliners, also men older than he. Their lips were moving to every word he said, as if they knew it too. And it dawned on me right then and there, hey, this is flat out Egyptian Book of the Dead stuff. This is using the power of your meat brain memorization to transcend it, to implant it so deep that you could memorize something. Well, I'll read you something in a minute, because it has something to do with astral projection. We hear the terms astral body, astral plane, and astral world thrown around in esoteric conversations as if we were talking about conscious ectoplasmic apparitions floating around geographical locations rather than vibratory frequencies of human consciousness, which is precisely what they are. The fact remains, however, that our adventures in these vibratory frequencies of consciousness often feel disturbingly like we are conscious ectoplasmic aspirations floating around geographic locations. Learning to navigate around this strange universe, which other cultures and other spiritual systems might call the spirit world, is particularly helpful to the magician who understands the importance of being able to think and function in this subtler world, a world that lies just behind and beyond waking consciousness. Indeed, just as the inventor's intangible idea is the foundation for his or her material invention, this world forms the foundation of the material plane of existence. In fact, any magical operation that obliges the magician to see with the mind's eye a symbol, a pentagram, a hexagram, a spirit, angel, demon, or any spiritual life that inhabits an inanimate thing, deals directly with this so-called astral dimension. Ancient magicians call the ability to view the spirit nature of things scrying. The adepts of the Golden Dawn called it traveling in the spirit vision. Lucid dreaming is another dimension, pardon the play on words, to this mysterious phenomenon of consciousness. The ancient Egyptians took the skill of lucid dreaming pretty seriously. In fact, the ability to consciously gain control of our dream self and circumstances of our dream environment may very well have been the cornerstone of the science of dying, whose master textbook was the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Below is a short excerpt from an article I wrote in Fate magazine, and here's what it said. Egyptian Book of the Dead is a magical text supposedly written by the god Thoth himself and designed to give the newly deceased man or woman a fighting chance of hanging on to his or her individual consciousness center by projecting it step by step through each phase of the death experience to arrive intact at a higher level of existence. One might even say a supreme level of existence. The basic idea is this: if a dying person can keep his mind focused and occupied on a series of particular ideas and images while the physical body dies, the self of the individual can separate from the physical body and take up residence in the mind. The preoccupied mind literally becomes an escape pod that will rescue the self from its attachment to the dying body and brain. At each step along the way, the deceased is required to identify with higher and higher aspects of the mind, a process that continues to create new and subtler escape pods that will keep rescuing the self until it finally is delivered safely and intact to the realm of the gods. Now, in the Egyptian, these different escape pods are represented. An entry into these new and higher frequency escape pods are, I'm digressing here, are symbolized or represented as pylons or large membrane doorways that you pass through. The Egyptian Book of the Dead ingeniously organizes this journey of ideas and images to match the landscape and nature of each of the progressively higher levels of consciousness, and requires the deceased to perfectly memorize and rehearse each leg of the trip prior to dying. Each level is guarded by a gatekeeper who must be identified by name and forced to allow the deceased to pass. Even the furniture has names that must be carefully memorized and identified with constant chatter. Everything that can be done to bolster the deceased's confidence and keep their mind minutely focused on anything but the temptation of allowing oneself to dissolve, like the untrained, uninitiated, into the sweet oblivion of death. Okay, that was from the book Low Magic, talking about astral projection, lucid dreaming, and such. Now, what Poke and I were discussing yesterday from the book An Accidental Christ, yes, it's a novel, and I know lots of you don't like novels, or they think they wouldn't like a novel by Lon DuQuette, but you might like this book. Okay. Let's see here. we're talking about an organized evolution of the Egyptian formula of the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the initiatory formula of raising someone from the dead as an initiation ceremony that is pantomimed uh, in remarkable fashion in the degrees of Freemasonry. And this is especially important when uh, experiencing the formula of ERO, or the formula of life, death, and resurrection. Okay. Uh, there's new and improved formulas, but the old formulas are still valid and uh, and necessary on their own self-referential level. The ceremony whereby man is raised from death to life. Oh, they're talking about doing this to Lazarus, their student and disciple. The ceremony whereby man is raised from death to life was a complex and grueling marathon, even for the skilled adepts of the Carmelite monastery. The procedure was fraught with danger. For 28 days prior to initiation, the candidate was isolated from the community in a windowless chamber and tutored by the meditation master. Each day he was allowed to drink only a small amount of rainwater and eat only a spoonful of paste made from mashed apples, raisins, and royal honey. The daily routine was relentless in its tedium. 2 hours of instruction, 2 hours of meditation, 1 hour for food and bathing, 2 hours for sleep. After 3 days, even the most attentive candidate could no longer reckon the hour or the day. Within a fortnight, he found it hard to discriminate between waking consciousness and dream. After 3 weeks, the words of the meditation master took visible form in the mind of the candidate and echoed as visual images across the screen of perpetual twilight. 3 days before the ceremony itself, the instruction period was discontinued. The candidate was allowed to recline on the floor while the master led him on a guided meditation of death. At this point, his consciousness could be plucked from his body like an overripe fig and guided through the wondrous and terrible membranes of post-mortem existence. With the meditation master acting as psychopomp, he was led in vision to the very threshold of absorption into Godhead. Extreme care was taken, however, to terminate the sessions before the supreme instant of ecstatic disillusion. It would be necessary for the pilgrim to take that step alone during the final ordeal. The candidate had no idea when the day of his initiation had arrived. The routine was followed as usual, but on that day his food was laced with a powerful drug made from the gall of a venomous fish. Within seconds of swallowing his last supper, he suffered profound paralysis. His breathing stopped, his body temperature dropped dramatically, and his heartbeat became imperceptible. To all outward appearances, he was dead. At this point, only the most experienced observer could determine whether or not physical death had actually occurred. The master physician was called into the chamber to examine the body and to solemnly declare, "Our brother is dead." Meanwhile, the helpless candidate remained entirely conscious of everything that was said and done around him. The body was then laid out, bathed, and wrapped in spices and strips of linen according with Jewish burial customs. Each act was accompanied by a song or a recitation of scripture. Precious in the sight of God is the death of his saints, etc. Followed by a procession of convincing mourners, the body was then paraded outside the monastery gates and taken to the necropolis, there to be laid upon a shallow shelf carved in the wall of a tomb. Quote, "For death is the destiny of every man," unquote. For 3 days, the body lay motionless in the cool silence of the grave. To keep from going mad, the candidate was compelled to fling his consciousness outside the shell of his paralyzed corpse. His only salvation was to reenact the death meditation over and over and over again until he crossed the final threshold to consummate the supreme marriage of human consciousness with that of the divine. If all was done correctly, on the afternoon of the 3rd day, the venom was neutralized by the natural defenses of the candidate's body. Then, in a meticulously choreographed ceremony, the master physician reanimated the candidate's lungs with a skillfully delivered blow to the chest. When normal breathing resumed, the meditation master removed the burial wrappings and grasped the newly raised perfect master firmly by his right hand and wrist. He pulled him up to embrace him. He whispered the vivifying word in his ear. This supreme word could never be uttered in life except by a person serving as master in the act of raising a candidate. And that was the ritual we were discussing yesterday, Poke and I, and especially one of the meditations itself, which I outline here, and which is something that very easy to practice, very harmless, and in my opinion, well worth memorizing and performing. I do it often, even before as I'm falling asleep at night. Anyway, wow, I just rambled on about that. Anyway, the book, please, shamelessly self-promote, Lon. The book is An Accidental Christ, okay? It's published by our good friends at Llewellyn. It would be a good thing, okay, to, after all the other books that I write that are like textbooks and crazy Kabbalah stuff, it would be nice for the publisher to at least be rewarded in their confidence that a novel could also make them a little could reward their confidence anyway. Anyway, until tomorrow and Saturday morning cartoons, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.